Welcome to the Deep Dive Books channel, where we hope you find something valuable every day.
Let's continue our exploration of Brian Klaas's Fluke. This is part 4 of our interpretation. Since the Enlightenment, we've been in search of the world's principles, trying to do the right thing. Behind this quest is a psychological drive. We want to control everything. When you feel in control, you're happy. When the world feels out of control, you're uneasy. In the past, people turned to religion for comfort, while today many seek control not only for themselves but also expect governments to manage every aspect of life. But as we discuss the evidence for evolution and complexity theory, we understand that many things simply happen by chance. Complex phenomena are the result of many interacting factors, and no one truly has control. So, if we can't control the world, should we just submit to fate or random events? Where can we apply our agency? Hold on. Klaas offers a great answer. We control nothing, but influence everything. How should we interpret this? Let's turn to history for some insight. History is certainly a human affair, but what is the relationship between people and the course of history? Over time, there have been a few explanations, and we'll examine them one by one. In ancient China, during the Shang dynasty, people believed that gods decided the course of history. Thus, they used rituals to bribe the gods, hoping for decisions favorable to them. After King Wu of Zhou defeated the Shang, the Duke of Zhou introduced the concept of the mandate of heaven, saying that gods no longer directly intervened in human affairs. The will of the gods was executed by human agents. The Son of Heaven. The real force behind history was the Son of Heaven. Later, medieval Europe adopted the idea of divine right of kings, which was essentially the same. From today's perspective, both the Son of Heaven and the divine right of kings represent a problem-solving mindset. There's already a divine will. Your task is to interpret and carry it out. Do it right and you're praised, do it wrong and your dynasty is overthrown. Of course, people in the civilized world shouldn't always invoke heaven or gods, so in China, we developed a more advanced approach. Public opinion represents the will of heaven. We assume that history moves in a correct direction. Even if the current direction is wrong, it will eventually be corrected, restoring justice to the people. Just as Liu Shaoqi said, fortunately, history is written by the people. But where is this public opinion? How do we interpret it? As Yuan Shikai says in the TV drama Towards the Republic, I have seen countless individuals, but I have never seen the people. Some historians have freed themselves from the constraints of heaven, gods, and the people, and simply claim that great individuals make history. This is known as the heroic interpretation of history. But the heroic interpretation is also a problem-solving mindset. There's only one correct path. You just need to find it. Who you are doesn't matter. Historians who have studied history on the ground understand that the mandate of heaven theory is a trick for the common people, and blind confidence for the so-called heroes. By the 19th century, after years of Enlightenment education, many people no longer believed in such ideas. Some scholars shifted from problem-solving thinking to scientific thinking. Why wait for a great leader? Why not directly study the objective laws of history? Hegel and Marx believed that history follows inevitable laws and that the future would unfold in a specific way, something no one could stop. Tolstoy also expressed this idea from a different angle. In War and Peace, he describes Napoleon's invasion of Russia, arguing that, given the political context, France would have invaded Russia regardless of who was in charge. This suggests that history doesn't even need a problem solver. It has its own momentum. If you don't act, someone else will. This is the idea of convergent evolution. You can find plenty of evidence, such as people often say Bell invented the telephone, but on the same day Bell applied for the patent, another person applied for the telephone patent. Newton and Leibniz independently invented calculus at the same time. At least 3 people discovered oxygen independently. The crossbow was independently invented in China, Greece, Africa, Canada, and the Baltic regions. So we might say that, if Einstein hadn't proposed relativity, someone else would have. What makes Einstein so special? It seems we should focus on the broader trends in history. But where do these big trends come from? Historians seem good at summarizing events after the fact, but they don't have a great track record when it comes to predicting the future. This brings us to the Annals School of Historians in the early 20th century, a group of French historians. They attempted to study human societal evolution through sociology, economics, psychology, anthropology, and other disciplines, examining culture, geography, and more. Only through such an approach could one hope to understand historical trends. Why does one policy succeed while another fails? For example, why could the Song dynasty issue paper money? Why was tea so important to the imperial economy? To understand such questions, you can't rely solely on biographical history like the 24 histories or the political struggles in the halls of power. You need to take a holistic view of society. These ideas make sense, but for Klaas, whether you look at big historical trends or the Annals School, both overlook the role of the individual. In these theories, every role is interchangeable. What is more important than who, and information is more important than the messenger. But in real history, especially at critical junctures, it is the specific individuals involved who determine whether history moves toward one attractor basin or another. Shouldn't we thank Kennedy and Khrushchev for preventing World War III? Shouldn't we thank Deng Xiaoping for making reform and opening up a reality? In hindsight, people tend to believe those choices were inevitable, but at the time, they were filled with uncertainty. Take the American Civil War. Current textbooks say the North represented the advanced industrial trend, while the South represented the backward slave system, so the North must have won. However, more and more historians believe the North's victory had a large element of luck. In 1862, Britain was already considering recognizing the South's independence, and the U.S. might have permanently split into two countries. Trends exist, but people make decisions. At critical points, no one is tossing a coin to make decisions. History is always more interesting when you look at the details. From the perspective of historical details, my interpretation is this. The specific personalities and wills of the players in the field shape history, but no one can make foolproof plans. Therefore, history is chaotic and unpredictable. Let me tell you another story. In 1828, the British Royal Navy had a ship called the HMS Beagle, which was docked in South America. The captain was suffering from depression and, during a period of bad weather, was so distraught that he shot himself. The Navy had to assign another officer, Robert Fitzroy, to take command. Fitzroy believed the former captain had committed suicide due to the loneliness of the voyage. Being an aristocrat, he couldn't socialize with ordinary sailors, so he sought a companion for the journey. He first asked a clergyman, but he couldn't go due to religious duties. Then he asked a professor, but the professor wanted to stay home with his wife. However, the professor had a former student who could join him on the trip. This student, as you might guess, was Charles Darwin. The Beagle would go down in history. When Darwin met Fitzroy, the captain almost didn't take him. Fitzroy was an expert in physiognomy and believed that Darwin's nose wasn't well formed, suggesting he lacked energy and perseverance. He was concerned that Darwin wouldn't be able to complete the journey. But in the end, he took Darwin aboard. Honestly, I don't see what's wrong with Darwin's nose. The rest is history. If any of these random events had turned out differently, Darwin wouldn't have had the opportunity for 2 global voyages, and wouldn't have proposed the theory of evolution. The world would have remained in the dark for many more years. But you might say, wait a minute, Wallace, another British naturalist, independently discovered the idea of evolution. In fact, Wallace sent his manuscript to Darwin, prompting Darwin to hastily publish On the Origin of Species. Wallace could have published the theory himself. But you need to look at the details of history. Klaas believes we should be thankful that Darwin, not Wallace, published the theory. Darwin was a respected member of the Royal Society, whereas Wallace, in modern terms, was an amateur scientist. Wallace dabbled in mysticism, including phrenology, seances, and hypnosis. He even claimed a medium could perform magic. He was famous, but for all the wrong reasons. Ridiculed in serious scientific publications. So if Wallace had published the theory of evolution, it would be roughly equivalent to a traditional martial artist releasing a new medical theory. Would you take it seriously? The theory of evolution was controversial from the start, and many people still oppose it today. Imagine the resistance in the 19th century. The reality is, science has its own momentum, but who the scientist is matters too. Thomas Paine had a famous saying. Paradigm shift. Scientists don't simply speak through experiments. They are human and have their own biases. These biases form a paradigm. An overarching framework. Accepting a new theory depends on whether it fits into the paradigm the individual already believes. If it doesn't, they'll question the results. And if the person doesn't have the right credentials. In the end, things are done by specific people in specific situations. Klaas's statement is true. We control nothing, but influence everything. In fact, you are already influencing things. Maybe you're performing standardized tasks in your company, thinking you're replaceable. But you are unique. Your genes are one of a kind, your birth overcame millions of sperm, and your experiences cannot be replicated. The world is already different because of you, and you can be more proactive, using your thoughts and personality to exert influence. The word contingent doesn't mean leaving things to randomness. It means, determined by small things. Whoever gets that, opportunity gets it. Since it's your turn now, you should leave your mark. This reminds me of an English expression. Let him cook, meaning, step aside and let him show his skills. It's the spiritual support your teammates give you. A variant of this phrase is, let me cook, meaning, watch me, I've got this. At those critical moments, will you dare to say, let me cook? Control is a delusion, but influence is our responsibility. That's all for today. In the next part, we'll discuss the science of doing things completely.
If you feel there is value in this, please like, subscribe to this channel, and leave your thoughts or suggestions in the comments section. Let's grow together and read more good books.